Hello and welcome. You're listening to the SPAG Dialogue podcast.
Hello everyone, I'm Neha Chandra, Healthcare Communication Specialist with SPAG, and today I'm in conversation with millennial father Mihir Joshi, who is a talk show host, anchor, singer, and on Instagram you can find him with the handle Mihir Joshi Music. So, on account of Newborn Awareness Week, we wanted to talk to someone who's been quite vocal about the equal parenting space, since the very first day. And Mihir, we have been a witness to your story through Instagram about taking care of your little boy. You
Hmm.
have also written blogs in the Indian Express about your experience as a father,
Right.
and this is something that we've been reading and hearing a lot about. But we also know that when it comes to parenting, I'd say more conversation comes from the mother's end,
Yeah.
and we do not hear a lot from the new father's side. With the birth of a child, with the birth of a baby, there's also a father that comes to life.
That's right.
And do tell us about how you prepped yourself for when you were expecting.
This is a very interesting question, and more importantly, something that led me to writing those columns that I did for Indian Express. I wrote for them for almost a year and a half. And the idea was whenever I saw conversations in the news or on social media about parenting, about being an active parent, it was always mothers or even celebrities who speak about their children. Most often, it's the mothers. There are very few fathers who you see creating content or talking about or writing about being a father, because it's kind of the old school rules apply where fathers are supposed to be like working and getting the house in order, and the mother is supposed to be like taking care of the child. And I don't agree with those rules, because I think those are very old school thoughts, and I think we've all gone way beyond that. And I don't say that I am an exception. I'm actually now one of many fathers that I personally know who are extremely involved with their with their kids, with the upbringing of their child, and they want to support their spouse as much as they can. Now, there are certain things that cannot be done by the fathers, but literally everything else can and should be done by the father as well, from the changing of the diaper to the bathing of the child to playing with the child to reading. And I mean, as kids grow up, of course, as newborns, some of these things are not relevant. But now that I have a son who's 3 years old, I pretty much do everything that I would expect my wife to do. I mean, the only thing that physically cannot be done by the fathers is the breastfeeding part. But even there, I think there's a major role that fathers can play in terms of supporting and enabling their wives to, ensure that their breastfeeding journey is as comfortable, as smooth as possible, basically. So, when you ask me, what do I feel? How was I prepping to get, ready for being a father? Just like the mother, you can't really prepare for that. It's the funniest thing. Now we realize that when in those 9 months when my wife Neha was pregnant, and we were expecting a child, things were like pretty chilled out, and she had a very comfortable pregnancy that way. There were no She didn't have any morning sickness. And till literally a month before my son Neil was born, we were traveling, we were doing all sorts of things. So it felt like this is quite comfortable, it's going to be easy. And the day your baby is born, you just realize, oh man, we just jumped into the deep end of the swimming pool, and we don't really know too much about swimming. I mean, okay, the basics of what to do. And Neha had done a ton of research. I mean, she'd done a lot of reading, but it still doesn't prepare you for the reality of being a parent. And on the day that you have a newborn, when he is 1 day old or she is 1 day old, you are 1 day old as a father, and you are your wife is 1 day old as a mother. So everybody has to learn. Of course, the child can't really learn at that point in time, so the parents have to learn how to handle the kids, and it's got to be a steep learning curve. If you don't pick up quick, you're going to have a problem. So if you ask me how did we prepare, we try to read as much as we can. We try to get things ready, like, okay, have some clothes ready, have like basic. And for us, we always knew that irrespective of whether we have a boy or a girl, we're going to have gender neutral clothes ready, we're going to have like a crib ready, and all those basic things we did. But what you do when a baby is actually born, man, that's just you got to experience it. And I think every parent kind of picks up very quickly. Some do it faster than the others, but they do pick it up and they figure out what to do. But nobody can tell you, like if anybody tells you, "Arey man, it's going to be super easy," it's not. So for all the fathers, especially listening to this podcast, for even for the young mothers who are going to have a baby, please recognize that everything you thought you know about having a baby is theoretical knowledge. When you get to the
Yeah.
practical part, it's a whole new ball game.
Exactly. And there's no one size fit all approach, right? I mean,
No,
it's
no,
it's once even before you read all those books, and of course we speak with a lot of people, a lot of advice comes in, but when it actually happens, is that's when you know that it's just something that you need to venture out, and it's something that you are working together with your wife on. But
exactly.
we also have a lot of, when I say a lot of advice comes in, there is your mother-in-law, the mothers who sort of have a lot of advice and traditional things that they would like you to follow. So how
Correct.
much of that really did you take in? And being a new age father, how did you listen to all that and also take to doing things differently?
So here's what I want to say to everybody listening right now. All your parents, they love you and they want nothing but the best for you. Trust me when I say this, their knowledge of being a new parent is a minimum of 20 to 25 years old. Let's assume you are having your first baby when you're 20 years old or 25 years old. That essentially means your parents' knowledge is at least that many years outdated because they were new parents when you were a baby. So they don't know the number of new things that have happened. So you have to be able to put your foot down and say that there are certain things that you want to do your way because you've done the research, you've spent the time understanding it, and things are just better. So we had a very interesting experience. Our parents, and I've always been the kind of person who wants to do things my way, and my wife is equally independent in her way of thinking and the way she's done stuff. And like I said, she did a fair amount of research. I was actually led by her. I mean, rather than listening to my parents, I knew that okay, here's a person who spends a lot of time reading, understanding, figuring things out. And it's not just about being a parent, but about things in general. Like if a new device comes in the house, she's the one who's trying to figure out how it works and all the things that go into it. I mean, though I am technically an engineer, she spends more time understanding the mechanics of things than I do. So I knew that she's going to be doing a lot of research. And when I heard the research, it wasn't just blind faith that okay, if my wife is saying barabar yoga, it will be correct. I did my sort of corroboration of that research. It made sense to me. And I said, okay, this makes sense. It may not be the old school way of doing things, but it makes sense. And I think we should give it a shot. And there was so many different things that we did with our son, which our parents had not seen anybody do before. And they were like very surprised by it. But they had the patience and they had the faith to know that, okay, our kids know what they are doing, or at least seem to know what they are doing. Let's give them the space as long as our grandson is fine, and whenever we see him, he's happy and smiling. I think they're doing a good job and they did not interfere. If you have parents like that, if you have in-laws like that, fantastic. If you don't, you still need to be able to draw a line and say that, yes, we know you love our kid. There are certain things that we are going to do our own way. I'm also not very superstitious. So I don't believe things, this is something that's been happening for generations, so why don't you do it? That doesn't make any sense to me. Just because generationally people have done something doesn't mean that it is necessarily right. I need to be convinced about the logic of something. So my advice is figure out what you want to do. See if there is sense in what you're doing. See if there are enough examples that something that you're doing has led to success in the modern era, in the modern world. And if it does, even if your parents or your in-laws don't agree or don't immediately believe what you're doing, go ahead and do it because it will lead to great results later on. And I'll give you just one example to prove this point. At the age of say 6 months, my wife decided that our son would have what is called baby-led weaning, and he would start eating pretty much everything that we eat. We started giving him solid foods, but done in a very, very simple way, not spicy, no sugar, no salt. And he would get, so suppose there was, if we were making bhindi at home, he would be getting pieces of bhindi, like long pieces, which he could hold in his hand. Of course, he didn't have a pincer grip, but he had a proper, a fist grip. So, we'd keep it long so that he could hold it in his hand, and then he'd keep gnawing on that. He got accustomed to the flavors of vegetables. He got accustomed to the flavors of food. We never made mashed food and gave him. We didn't give him pureed food and things like that. And now at the age of 3, forget at the age of 3, I think by the age of 1.5, he could come with us anywhere outside, and we knew we didn't have to worry about what will the child eat. And when this began, my parents were like, what is going on? Arey, you should be giving him this, you should be giving him that. Typically old school, sort of things that parents expect to, give their newborns. And we said, no, just believe in this, let it happen. And now our parents are the biggest evangelists. They are the ones who are telling all other friends of theirs, all other, grandparents, saying that, Arey, look at our grandson. He is so smart and he can eat on his own and he eats everything. We don't have to worry about him. So, I'm saying that mindsets of parents, as in parents, your moms-in-law, that can also be changed, but you have to believe in what you're doing. And you need to know that, okay, what you're doing is not just some random thing that came to you in your dreams, but it's something that scientifically proved that there are enough examples that this does work. And we've seen so many things that we've implemented work. So yeah, I mean, getting back to the essence of your question, we didn't really listen way too much to our moms and moms-in-law unless it was something that kind of went parallelly with what we were anyway wanting to do.
Yeah, because I think in the Indian culture, what happens is that we have all, especially when it comes to taking care of a baby, we have all these opinions pouring in. And while, of course, everyone means well,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, it's the parents who need to take that call, what advice to take and what to filter.
Yep.
And we also have so many new parenting styles that have come up that we read about. And social media, especially, gives us so much of information that, of course, we need to understand and filter there as well what information to take and what's right
Absolutely.
for us.
Correct.
So at the center of it, though, we have the newborns, we have the babies, and
Right.
we know there are really, they're fragile beings. So as a father of a 3-year-old, if you can
Yeah.
give us 5 basics that every parent should follow. I know there's not a one size fit approach, but just 5 basics that we can have for our listeners.
So 5 basics every parent should follow. Let me tell you from a father's perspective rather than telling you very scientific things that you can do. Firstly, for me is I don't think as a father you need to be scared of the fact that there is a new being in your life. They are tiny, they are fragile, and you don't know. Some parents, some fathers especially, they're like even worried about holding their baby. I think the first thing I'm going to tell you is please don't be worried. I think this is something that you do not need to worry about at all. It is a very natural thing having a baby, and they kind of adapt to you immediately. I mean, for me, I loved holding my baby. I mean, I think that's one of the most important things. I can't begin to tell you how special it felt and how important it is that you hold your baby. Some things that we learned and that I saw being done with Neil, which made a lot of sense, which we intentionally followed. For instance, if you are burping them, hold them in that. There's like a frog position where the knees are held up. That's a position that you'd want to hold so that they don't get colic, and it's not a bad situation for your baby. Secondly, don't like swaddling is important, but also give them enough space. If you're living in a hot city, like for instance, if you're living in a place like Mumbai, which is pretty much hot all the time, recognize that, hey, if you are not going to be like completely wearing sweaters and wearing a ton of stuff, that's pretty much how the baby feels as well. They probably feel hot as well. So I mean, of course, swaddling is important, but do not go overboard. Don't put those monkey caps and like stuff that you would not expect to see on a bigger person in a hot city. Do not put way too much of that on your child. The swaddling idea is great because you make them feel comfortable and they feel like how they are in the in the womb. They feel nice and relaxed and everything, and they can go off to sleep. But don't overdo it, is what I'm saying. I think that was 3 things. 2 more things that I can think of is, yes, if you're massaging your child, this is something that happens in Indian families everywhere. You either do it yourself or there are bais that come to massage your babies. Please tell them not to overextend the limbs of the child, not to press too hard, don't open up the legs, don't open up the hands. Do gentle massaging of the babies because they are delicate, fragile beings, like you said, and you don't want to damage or hurt them in any way. And the final thing that I would like to say is that keep, for a newborn, especially in the first few days, keep the umbilical cord area clean, the stump which is there dry and clean, so that it can fall off naturally and go away as soon as possible. Don't do stuff with it, like even if it looks kind of weird, don't play around with it, because that was my instinct. And most importantly, in those first few days, pay attention to the child. Like you are the people who are most responsible for that child. The child can't really do anything. So pay attention to its needs and everything that's happening, because they're kind of confused, man. They're like out in the world and they don't really know what's happening, and you got to be the ones who are kind of guiding them through those first few days. So I think that kind of covers 5 basics that every parent should know.
So Mihir, the tips that you've mentioned is something that I'm sure we've heard here and there, and we read about it. But there's always that constant reminder, and considering that at the end of it, we're taking care of our own babies. That's where that constant reminder and reading about it just helps. And listening from a father, I think it's definitely something that's very helpful. And there's also something that we read a lot about, something called skin to skin contact, which is also known as kangaroo care.
Right.
So, and right now, you also mentioned that fathers, or for that matter, parents, were also very concerned about holding our babies, even though there are kids, but the whole concept of them being really fragile. So,
Right.
how effective is this kangaroo care technique of connecting with your baby?
I'm sure there are reasons that scientifically it is a great thing to do, but I'll tell you on a very personal note, it was the most gratifying and happy making thing in my life. We discovered baby wearing at a very, very early stage with Neil. I think he was maybe 5 or 6 weeks old when we got our first carrier, and we've not looked back ever since. In fact, both Neha and I, we've had our share of carrying him. In fact, Neha has put him to sleep so many times in the carrier when he was fairly, I think until the age of almost 1, he would be in the carrier. 1.5, he was in the carrier going off to sleep, because they just feel so much more comfortable. They just, they kind of go with for me, in terms of, say, from a musical perspective, as a musician, I think they kind of align frequencies with you. And if you are calm and if you are peaceful, they kind of realize that, and it helps them calm down, it helps them sleep. And for me, like I said, apart from the scientific good that baby wearing or that skin to skin has, for me it was just such a positive feeling, such a great experience, that this is my child, this is something that, this is a human being that my wife and I created, and it just felt great. Every time I would hold him, it would make me happy. And it also gave, realistically speaking, if you learn how to do baby wearing at a very young age, when your child is really young, that's also a great help to the mothers, because mothers, especially in the first 6 months, are severely taxed, just from the breastfeeding demands of a child, who has to have milk almost every 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever. So if you are able to baby wear as a father, if you're able to do that, you give a little time for your wife to relax, because very often when you're holding the baby will go off to sleep, and it feels great when you have a tiny little baby, 1 month, 2 month, 3 month old baby who's lying, who's on your chest, and maybe you're walking around. After you've finished walking and the baby has gone off to sleep, you can even sit down. They're not going to wake up just because you sit down. You don't have to continue walking for 1 hour. You could probably walk for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and put your baby to sleep in the carrier. You can sit down, and the best part is both your hands are free. You can read a book, keep your phone on silent, check out your phone, do things around the house, do chores, get food ready for your wife, because that's the most important thing that you can do as a husband. Keep feeding and giving water to your wife as much as possible. You can go out for a walk. You don't need to be restricted to your house. Your baby doesn't need to be restricted to the house. It's okay, chalo, even if you say in Indian beliefs that the first 40 days you don't go out of the house, that's it. On the 41st or 42nd day, you can be baby wearing. If you figured out how to do that, and you could go out for a walk within your colony, or you could go out for a walk on your terrace. Just feel the air outside with your child, and even for mothers who feel that, I have to be at home all the time, they get a chance to go out, they get a chance to see the world, just breathe in fresh air from outside. And it's a great feeling. I mean, whether it's fathers or mothers, skin to skin, or kangaroo care, as you called it, I think it's one of the most incredible things, and we are immensely grateful that we discovered baby wearing as soon as we did. I think it was one of the best things in raising Neil.
And these different parenting styles, and what we hear, maybe you might have heard it from a friend or from a doctor, on different ways of engaging with your baby, interacting with your baby. I
Yeah.
think it just it's an evolving thing, and as we as more parents, as more we get new parents in this space, we just learn a lot more different things, and there'll be more openness to even discussing on these. Because if I actually think about this amongst fathers now, I'm
Yeah,
just moving on to the next question, that
sure.
amongst fathers, how much of a conversation really happens when it's, how I took care of my baby, or things to keep in mind when fathers get together? Are these conversations that really happen?
So, it's a very difficult thing to genuinely explain because, from our personal experience, we realize that unless you have a friend, an existing friend who has a baby who is around the same age as your child, you genuinely have no common ground. Your friends who are maybe the same age as you, but who don't have kids or who have older kids just cannot relate with where you are at. So it's a fairly isolating thing at times. So what you need to do is you need to develop new friendships, you need to cultivate new friends, find other parents who are having a child around the same age as yours, and then you will see that there are so many things that you can talk about. I mean, we discovered this a little later, of course, when Neil kind of grew a little older and he started going to Montessori. We found parents over there whom we could connect with relate with, who had the same kind of philosophies as we did. And then, of course, whenever we meet them, there's so much that we can talk about, whether it's the fathers talking to each other or, of course, the mothers talking to each other. There's a lot more to talk about. I mean, it's not just that. I mean, even when I speak with some of the mothers who I meet, say, who've come to pick up their kids, there's a fair amount of conversations that you can have because they are exactly in the same space that you are. So you got to realize that your old friends, they still love you and they care about you, but they cannot relate. So don't feel bad if they don't ask you the relevant questions or they cannot empathize with you, because it's just not possible. Like, how do you explain the taste of a banana to somebody who's never even seen a banana, right? It's as simple as that. Or choose any other fruit or any other food item that you want to. But the point is that it's that difficult for non-parents to understand your situation. So I think you do have conversations, but you will have conversations about parenting, about different things that you're going through, only with people who can relate with it.
Me sort of, agree with you on this, and you can't have all conversations with one person. So we do understand that when we're talking to a fellow father, there might be a difference in opinion. There will also be considering that what age your kid is
Yeah,
of at that point of time. As we've spoken, we've had this whole conversation about your journey as a father and the different parenting styles. But to
right.
finally end with, what would your advice be to expecting fathers or new fathers on adapting to the new parenting styles and taking care of your newborn?
I think one of the biggest things that I can tell any father is that you have one partner in this, and that is your wife. It is your job, it is your biggest responsibility to make sure that she feels supported. It's a very, very difficult situation for women who suddenly have to become mothers. One day they're not mothers, and the day their child is born, they are mothers and they have responsibility, in a manner of speaking, for the rest of their life. And it's a daunting thing. So the one thing that fathers can do to begin with is to sort of ease the burden that mothers feel when they have a baby. And she's your partner, she's your friend. Support her, do research together, understand how you want to raise your child, and then support her, even if it means you have to oppose your own parents or her parents or the rest of the world. Because the most important person for you after the baby itself who is born, obviously feel a ton of love for them. I mean, I think the more important person for you, even more than the baby, is actually your wife. So, you got to support her as much as you can, give her attention and care, and simple things like, making sure, like, I mean, I wasn't joking about earlier when I said that food and water is something as, essential as it can possibly be for a breastfeeding mother. I think that's another thing that I want to really, really focus on, and tell fathers that to support your wife's breastfeeding journey is the biggest thing that you can do. Every woman has different ambitions for her breastfeeding journey. Maybe some of them want to do it for 6 months and they want to go to work after that, and they want to continue to maybe pump and feed their child. Maybe they want to give them formula, whatever it is. The point is, every mother has their plan, and it's your responsibility to support that plan and give them complete faith in knowing that, okay, if nobody else gets it, you do, and you're going to be supporting them. Like, for instance, with us, it was very clear. Like, I knew that my wife wanted to breastfeed exclusively for 6 weeks, for 6 months, and continue doing that, and it'll be a baby led weaning where our son will eventually tell, okay, now I'm done, thank you very much, now I'm not going to have any more milk. But till then, we are happy to keep that going, and it takes a lot of effort to make that happen, whether it's at home, whether it's in public, whether it's anywhere else. You need to be the biggest pillar of support for your wife, and I think that's the biggest bit of advice that I can give you. And like I said, don't be in a bubble. Don't say things like, oh, this is her job. Nothing is her job. Everything is your job and her job. It's together. I mean, you work on this together. And the final bit of advice is baby wearing. Just get into it. Like, I cannot stress enough of how important that is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just better when we have that open communication, within with the mother and father when they talk things through. And I'm sure the way you've described your journey and everything that you have gone through and are still, a part of, it's also important that when you hit that sort of bump and you talk it through, so that
Yeah.
it's just better to navigate through the whole thing. And reading is essentially important, like we stressed, your reading and talking and
Extremely. Yeah.
communicate. Yeah.
Yeah.
And reading, and also, references, even now with social media being such a strong space, while not taking everything that it says, but we have
Correct.
a lot of doctors on as influencers who are taking this
Correct.
space and who are addressing all this. So I
Correct.
think even that's important, to just wherever you get the information from and then coming home and actually discussing and talking it through. And
Before
yeah.
we wrap up, I want to give a shout out to one group which kind of helped us, and which has been a massive support for thousands of mothers in our country. See, I mean, I've spoken quite eloquently about how we felt about breastfeeding and everything, and that's one of the most important aspects of raising a newborn, especially. And it is a difficult thing. It's not something that you just automatically understand how to do. I mean, even if it seems like your parents say that अरे ये तो इतने सालों से लोग करते आ रहे, what's to learn in this? Automatically you take your baby and they'll know what to do. But there are a lot of complications. There are a lot of things that are happening which need answers. And just instead of just trying to figure it out, there are enough support groups, like you were just saying. There's enough stuff on social media right now which is genuinely helping mothers. I'm not saying confusing mothers even more, but genuinely helping. And we found a group called BSIM, which is Breastfeeding Support for Indian Mothers, which was tremendously helpful to Neha. And I've literally recommended it to every friend who's had a baby in the last 3 years. Ever since we discovered the group, we've been evangelists and we've been telling people, join it, because everything that you think you have a question about, another mother has already asked it, and that has been answered in the group. You'll find answers. You'll be able to get all the answers in one place about simple things that are bothering you.
And that's so important that you just said that, you join this group and you will find all the questions that probably you wanted to ask, but somebody has already asked that question. And that
Exactly.
just makes us feel that,
We're
no
not alone.
question that, yeah, we're
Yeah.
not alone, and no questions like a stupid question. We have those concerns. And
Exactly.
there are
Exactly.
these Facebook groups, it's on Instagram, and we can actually reach out, and even in comment sections when we see such concerns.
Yeah.
And that could just lead to creation of another group, and you
Correct.
might find people living close by, and from online setting you can actually move on to even an offline
In
meeting.
person. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, and I'm telling you, it is such a massive help when you find people. Like, you may think that, Ari, this is such a silly question, and you see that same silly question has been asked by 30 other women, and there have been legitimate answers given. And these groups are not ad hoc groups. They are not like time pass, chalo, just because I felt like doing it. There are people who are administering the group, who are moderators over there, who are lactation consultants. There are doctors. There are people giving legitimate good advice. There are brands getting affiliated because they know that these groups are good. There are, this group that I specifically spoke about is actually given a grant by Facebook because they see the value of teaching mothers about breastfeeding and, supporting them with all these queries and everything. So I
The
think there are
nature of
enough.
content.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The nature of content is so legitimate and so well done that it's not some random group, and especially on a topic like breastfeeding, you want to join a secure group where you feel safe, that all the people in the group are
A
good people,
judgment free zone.
judgment
Yeah.
free zone. And more importantly, everybody who's joined the group has been vetted by the administrators and moderators of the group. There are no random lechery kind of guys who've joined the group because the group is about first thing is, normalizing the word breastfeeding. I think the
Yes.
moment the normal janta hears the word breast anywhere, their brains start working in a different way. And I think that needs to be normalized. People need to start talking about breastfeeding normally. Talk to their parents, talk to their children. Don't be embarrassed. Say, oh, I have to go and feed him. No, say you have to breastfeed, because the moment you normalize it, it doesn't become weird and taboo. If your child needs to be fed out in public, child is not planning out. He doesn't know where you've gone. She doesn't know where you've gone. You're in public, but the child is hungry. You're not going to tell the child, hey, you know what? Why don't you chill for about 45 minutes or an hour? We are anyway going to get into the car, then I'll feed you. No, you got to open your minds first, and then automatically through your conversations, you're going to start opening the minds of people around you as well, where, you will find that, yes, it is okay to feed my child in public, because that's normal. That's the normal way of living. And
Absolutely.
even that confidence to do that you get when you hear other mothers talking about their experience, when you hear other people talking about their experiences. So yes, it's important to be in a community where your feelings, your thoughts, your philosophies that you want to raise your child with are validated and embraced by others. Maybe you've got something different that you want to do as well, but there's nobody judging you and saying, hey, why are you doing that? That's not right. They if it is genuinely wrong for your child, they may give you an advice and say that, you know what, maybe that's not good for your child, and then you can decide to take it. But the point is, you at least have a group of peers and friends and people who genuinely seem to care about you, which is such a difficult thing to find when you've become new parents. Like, your friends don't understand it, but at least here you found a community which understands it.
Absolutely. And when we say newborn, when we talk about newborn awareness and this whole conversation that we're having today, or for the fact that there's something called a newborn awareness week,
Correct.
it's not just awareness of the mother or the father, but it's also the community, like you rightly pointed out.
Correct.
And, on this note, I think we've had a very engaging conversation with you, Mihir. So thank you so much for joining the SPAG Dialogue podcast and for sharing your story, firstly, and also being like this guiding light for all the, expecting and new fathers out there. And for all our listeners, this was Mihir Joshi, and I'm Neha Chandra, and you're listening to SPAG Dialogue.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to tune in to more such conversations, subscribe to the SPAG Dialogue podcast or visit our website spagdialogue.com.